Greetings, class, on this stormy Sunday. If you are in the Oshkosh area, you are aware of this. So I just wanted to do a quick video here to review a little bit about what we learned in this past week. So on the message boards, you wrote a lot about what an ideal board member should look like. And a couple of things that really stuck out to me is that all of you kind of gravitated towards this passion, focus, and belief in the mission of the organization. And I do think that it all starts there, because if you don't have somebody, sorry if you hear that thunder, because if you don't have somebody that really cares about the organization and feels passionate about the organization, how in the world are they going to really exercise their other hard skills? So, for example, if you have an accountant on your board because you really care about having a board member that has an understanding of the finances of the organization, it doesn't really matter if they're professionally competent if they're not engaged and not passionate about the organization. I also think it was interesting that I think it was Bakri, I forget who wrote it, wrote about the need for diversity in board members. There's more and more focus on that in the nonprofit sector, because similar to theories of representation in public administration, the idea that a government can best serve its public if it has a cross section of that public able to represent that public and those individual publics in a leadership role. Um, the government will, the theory being the government will be better, will be higher performing, more representative, etc. That crosses over into the nonprofit sector, especially if you buy into this idea that nonprofit organizations are subsidized by the public via their tax-exempt status. Now, I certainly think that that's a factual statement. I have had some people in the past, both professionally and even in class, kind of question that and saying that no, a tax benefit's not the same as a subsidy. I think it's a logical carry through that if you are not paying income tax, and you otherwise would be based on your nonprofit status, that is a tax subsidy that you're receiving directly from the public, and it implies some type of duty, some type of responsibility to the public at large. So certainly having a representative board is one way to ensure that there is that bridge between the public at large, who is subsidizing the nonprofit organization, and the actual nonprofit organization. Now, doing that in practice is a lot harder than just talking about it. There have been some organizations, especially in major cities, that have kind of been like speed dating for board members, where their unique goal is to actually get nonprofit boards who are looking for diversity hooked up with individuals who want to serve. So there might not be that direct connection, but there is an ability for those two groups to meet each other and create those synergies and really expand the diversity of nonprofit boards. That's successful to a degree. But yeah, it certainly is an emerging area of study, as well as people try to better understand the effectiveness and, I guess, the differences of, I should say differences, but improvements that might occur when you have a truly representative board. But let's talk a little bit about something that was in the Worth text. That was, what do board members actually do? Because there are these three legal duties of board members that I know you read about it, but I think it's really important that we emphasize it if we are going to be discussing what the ideal characteristics of a nonprofit board are. Whatever your opinion, and there was certainly some debate on the message boards about what the ideal board member should be. There are legal responsibilities that come with being a nonprofit board member. So certainly kind of the number one qualification for a board member is that they understand these duties and are able to meet these duties. The first is a duty of care. And that means that each board member has a legal responsibility to participate actively in making decisions on behalf of the organization and exercise their best judgment while doing so. What does that mean? Well, it means that board member, in their capacity as a board member, should always be representing the best interests of the board, and certainly not their own best interests. And they always need to be cognizant of places where their own interests might come into conflict with the interests of the organization. The second is the duty of loyalty. And this ties into the duty of care. Each board member must put the interests of the organization before their own personal and professional interests. So the duty of care implies there, or I guess states you have this legal responsibility to be an active participant on behalf of the organization. And the duty of loyalty clarifies legally that you cannot have a conflict of interest. And finally, the third is the duty of obedience. Board members bear the responsibility of ensuring that the organization complies with the applicable federal, state, and local laws and adheres to its mission. So kind of implied in the duty of obedience is that all of your board members are up to date on federal, state, and local laws, as well as the mission of the organization. Now, there is so much more to nonprofit board governance. We could teach, and someday I'd like to in this program, teach a class just about board governance. If you go and you go to Google Scholar or you go to the Polk Library and look at the 3 major journals in the nonprofit sector, that's Nonprofit Management and Leadership, that's NVSQ, which is Nonprofit and Voluntary Sector Quarterly, and Valentis, which is more of an international nonprofit journal, you'll find that board governance is a huge topic. Specifically, people are trying to understand who serves on boards and why, so the motivation side of it. People want to understand how effectiveness and accountability are even defined in nonprofit boards. And then finally, kind of the holy grail is trying to understand exactly how how nonprofit governance, so the nonprofit board governance, how that actually translates into performance of the organization. It's one of those things that intrinsically and logically we all kind of say, yes, of course, a board that has better oversight and is higher functioning is going to lead to a higher performing organization. But the question is always into that black box. Are there things that board members can do? I personally do a lot of research on alignment of interests. So my argument is that it's really hard to pin down, these are the 10 things all board members should do, or these are a list of best practices. But it's easier to actually measure how individuals serving on boards together define key concepts and how they even interpret their interactions with one another. When there's that alignment between goals, definitions of key concepts, and when there is this emotional intelligence, meaning that you can kind of read your fellow board member, and they can read you, and they can be open and honest even when you disagree, and you can move on. That those are the things that are going to translate into higher board performance, higher organizational performance, because that board is going to know exactly what it is and what it's trying to accomplish, and be more responsive and be able to make better policies that affect the direction of the organization. With that, thank you again for your participation this week on the message boards. Thank you very much for a lot of those questions that were asked and for answering back and forth. My general rule of thumb on the message boards for me is that if there's a question that needs to be answered that's not being answered, I'll chime in. But you'll learn more if you actually answer the questions that are asked of one another. So anytime you can weigh in and help your fellow classmate with a question they posed, I encourage you to do so, and I will certainly allow you to do so. Only chiming in where I feel I need to chime in. So this week is the 4th of July. I hope you have a happy and safe holiday. We have no responsibilities this week. Well, you don't have any class responsibilities this week. I'm sure you have other responsibilities. I will be in touch this week with instructions for your final project. Thank you to everyone who contacted me about what they were interested in. I will go ahead and reach out to each one of you individually with responsibilities. Some of you might be in small groups, and I'll divvy up responsibilities. But that'll occur in the middle of this week or so. But I don't want you to stress about that. I want you to focus on either catching up on things if you haven't caught up on it, and having a nice, safe holiday. And I will be in touch, like I said, during the week, but then also next Sunday as regular with instructions for our 3rd module. Thank you again for a great week, and stay dry today.